of us are going to say at many different times in our lives, this is not the plan. I've yet to find someone not have said that in their life, young or old. Yet we can find joy and happiness, and we can find good in our lives. And it has to do with where we choose to focus and the words we choose to put on each and every day.
Welcome to another episode of Relentlessly Resilient, presented by Minky Couture, a weekly podcast where people share real-life experiences and the tools they've developed to move forward and live their best life. I'm Michelle Scharf.
And I'm Jenny Taylor, and it's back to school time. So if you have maybe a young son or daughter in your life, or niece or nephew or friend that's moving away to the dorms, you could send them with a Minky, and it would feel like a hug from home. You could get it in the school colors. You could embroider your name, Love Mom, or whatever. Anyway, we are so grateful to Minky for sponsoring this show. What they embody is love, comfort, warmth, support, and you feel that in the very fabric of the blankets. If you don't believe me, go check them out. They have 6 stores right here in Utah and minkycouture.com. But Michelle, today I'm really excited to introduce a friend of mine, Becky Kemp. Hi, Becky.
Hi, so good to be here with you.
Okay, so this is great. Becky and I have known each other a while, but we've only ever met in person maybe a couple of times. We're part of a public speaking coaching course called the Relevant Speaker Velocity Coaching. And we're both learning how to take the message and the passion and the talking we've been doing for a long time and try to build a business out of it. So we have group calls sometimes, or we'll run into each other at each other's speaking events and cheer each other on. Becky, you've been a great support to me, so thank you. She's been a wonderful sounding board. And when it was mentioned that Michelle and I host this podcast on resilience, Becky said, wait a sec, I've got a great message on resilience, and let me tell you how words tie into resilience. So Becky, introduce yourself and then teach us. Let's learn together.
Oh, well, I'm so glad to be here. My name is Becky Kemp, and I do love the power of words. And I do think that resiliency starts with where you focus, because all of us have probably said in our lives, this is not the plan at one time or another, right? I think that's what we all have in common. And I said that many years ago when I found out that my 4th child was going to be another boy. And it was one word. My husband and I heard the same word, but we had 2 different reactions. He was smiling and happy, and I started to cry. And he couldn't understand that. And the truth was, I had a plan when I was a young girl. I wanted a family of 2 boys, 2 girls, and they kept coming out boys, right? That was not my plan. And that's kind of a simple story, and I share it a lot of times. But we can still find joy in our journey, even when life doesn't go as planned. So I'm actually a mom of 5 boys, no girls. I am moving forward with speaking. I'm a life coach, and I talk about how you can speak your success, how you can use intentional language to move your story forward despite what happens. Because so often, and I fell into this trap myself, I got stuck and I was focused on all the negative things, and I stopped seeing the beautiful things in my life.
Okay, I love that so much. And I have a story I probably shared before. I have 3 boys in a row, and which was fine. I already had an older daughter. She was so excited when I was pregnant with that 3rd new sibling, but we didn't find out the gender until birth. And so she was with grandma. We went into the hospital. We had the baby. Grandma calls and lets her talk to us over the phone. And she's so excited. Mommy, is the baby here? Mommy, is the baby here? And we say, yes, the baby is here. And she asks, is it a boy or a girl? And I say, it's a boy. And she just handed the phone back to grandma. She was not interested. But ironically, the next baby was a little sister, and they don't always get along. So she's actually closer to her brothers and her sister, but maybe that's age. We'll see. But I get what you're saying. Whether it's something simple or really heartfelt and serious, these unexpected twists and turns in life can really throw us off. And sometimes we look back and maybe laugh at ourselves that, okay, it wasn't that big of a deal. But in the moment, it's that big of a deal. So talk a little bit about where you started to really develop the concept of words as a resiliency tool.
Yeah, so about 10 years ago, even though I had a very, I would call charming life, I was struggling. But I knew all the right things to say, right? I could put the happy smile on. I could, how are you? I'm fine. You know, I knew all the lingo, so to speak, but inside I felt unfulfilled, and I was losing the essence of who I was. And I think that I had spent a long time being a full-time mom, which I am so grateful I had that opportunity, but I had some other passions and work to do. And I found myself really stuck. And I was focused on all the things in my life that weren't going well, right? Like my husband owns a mortgage business. And I was focused on, we went through some hard years with the economy in like that 2008 through 2010 time where we almost lost everything. And I was focused on all the negative. I dealt with addiction issues. I was focused on, why does this have to happen in my life? And at one point I'm a prayerful person, and I prayed and I asked my higher power, what can I do to change? And the thought came, change your words and you can change your story. And that started me on a path. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I first thought, my words are fine. Like, I don't talk mean, but most of us talk much meaner to ourselves than we ever talk to anyone else, right? Wouldn't you agree?
Yep.
And 100%. We would say all the right things to everyone else, and we're here to help everyone.
Sure.
But we don't know how to receive it ourselves and to talk kind to ourselves. And what I've learned about words over the last 10 years is that they have an effect on us, a positive or negative effect. And we really get the power to choose that effect. So it doesn't mean we're not going to have hard days. Doesn't mean we're not going to have hard things. And resilience is always going to be part of our story. Yet we can find joy and happiness in the moments moving forward.
Okay, so I want to learn more. I know you've written a book and you've got what, 7
words.
Tell us about those 7 words, because I call myself a word nerd, and I love the dictionary. Like, I'm looking up words all the time, but most of the time when I'm looking words up in the dictionary, they are very simple, common words. I'm not looking up the supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. I'm looking up words like joy or truth or the word that we use 1,000 times. I know what it means, but I find so much deeper meaning when I really look at the dictionary or the history of that word.
Or sometimes we've discovered that we actually have
we're using it all wrong.
Yeah, which is why I love Brené Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart.
Yes.
Where she takes those words and really explains to us how we're misusing them and the appropriate use. So tell us the name of your book.
The book's called The Word Effect, 7 Simple Words to Create Your Most Beautiful Life. And honestly, it's the 7 words that helped get me unstuck. Okay. And when I was a little girl, I'm just going to back up just a little bit. I always wanted to write a book. And I always wanted to be on a stage. I just had that dream. Yet as I went through life, I let negativity and fear hold me back, because I would, for example, go into the bookstore and see all the books on the shelf and think, I don't have an original idea. I don't have anything to offer the world. Well, if you think that, that's what you're going to create.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the interesting thing about books, and I get where you're going with that, and I'm in the process right now of writing a book, which is a lot of work.
Yes,
it's a process.
It is.
I just wrote my first rough draft, and it's rough.
It's going to be amazing. I believe in it.
Don't quit. Just keep moving forward.
I'm not quitting. I hired Mel Robbins as my coach, and I've got to do it. But not having an original idea. I had that thought come to me in this process of writing a book, and I thought, does this really matter? Like, it's probably, these things are just lessons of truth, and like, they're so out there. They've been said a million times. Like, why does it matter? And immediately as I thought that, I had a message come to me and said, it's not your voice. And somebody needs to hear your voice.
Exactly.
I love that.
And we each have a story.
Yeah, absolutely.
And our story is that important. So that was my paradigm shift. Instead of focusing on, I don't have an original idea, I thought, you know what? If all these other people have a story, then why can't I put my story out there too?
Totally.
Right.
Just shift the mindset.
It just shift your mindset. Like nothing else changed. So the first word of the 7 words is to acknowledge.
Okay.
You have to acknowledge your dreams and desires. You have to acknowledge your sadnesses. I think it's so great you guys talk about resiliency. It gives people a place to talk.
That's actually the first step of resiliency, is to acknowledge, not to judge it. Yeah. Just acknowledge it for what it is.
Yes. You have to take...
That's a deeper concept than it is a sentence, right? But yes, I love where you're going with this.
You have to separate what I do as a coach and help people see. You have to separate the facts from the story, because we all have a story and we can fill in the blanks of the story. And if we're not careful, that story can get really scary really quickly, right? So we have to look at the facts. So you have to start acknowledging. And as you start to acknowledge your dreams, your desires, the wants of your life, the sadness of your life. I mean, as we learn to be honest human beings, good things happen. So for me, when I, 10 years ago, started to acknowledge out loud that I wanted to write a book and I wanted to speak, the people, places, and resources started coming into my life. I started writing my book in 2019 was when I really started to focus on it. And I just published it at the end of last year. It was a long process. At first I was self-publishing. Then I found a publisher, Leadership Books. There was one thing after another. The path was not clear, but the path was provided. So that's the first word. That's the first
word. The path wasn't clear, but the path was provided, and you don't find it unless you're on it. I mean,
and unless you're
moving, right? You'll see the rest of it a piece at a time.
Yes,
but that's so hard because I want the whole path just laid out to me before I start. I'm just acknowledging.
Let me know that I want to be on the path, right?
Yeah.
But so the first word's acknowledge. The second word is ask. The power of asking is such an important concept. And again, like you said, Jenny, they're simple words. These are words that everybody has access to. I haven't come up with something new. Truth is not new. And Jim Rohn is a business philosopher that says that. He says, truth is already out there. It's just how you learn it. So we hear different things. So we learn to ask better questions. So what I like to teach people is instead of asking, why is this happening to me? Ask, how do I step forward? Sometimes you do have to ask why, because you're in a place of like sadness. When I found out I was having my fourth boy, I was like, why is this happening? But if I had stayed there, now he's almost 20 years old. If I would have stayed there, I would have missed out on the joy of everything that this young man has turned into, right? So instead, I've gotten to ask, how do I be the best boy mom out there? How do I have good relationships with my kids? With other things that have happened when I found that I had some addiction issues, how do I step forward with that instead of why is this happening to me? So just asking better questions, because when we ask how questions, it gives our brain something to work on and it gives our brain something to focus on, a solution. When we ask why, we only see the obstacle.
It's interesting that you brought this up. I like to ask myself, and in the process of writing my book, this is actually one of the things that came out. My husband and I never asked why when he got diagnosed with cancer. But I realized while I was writing this book, my process of building resiliency in my life is that I always ask myself, what is the good things that I can see out of this situation? So I've always looked for the bright side of a bad situation. And I don't know exactly when that started for me, but I can look back in my life and it's always been that way for at least the last 30 years that I can remember.
So that to me is a gift. You have learned to focus on the good. So each of us has what's called a negative bias, and our brains are wired to protect us. And the National Science Foundation has found that the average human being has about 60,000 thoughts a day, and 80% of those thoughts are negative.
Yeah.
So you have to actually redirect your mind. Well, back in caveman days, we were meant to protect ourselves, right?
Okay.
So now
Fair.
in where we live now, when there's unsettled things, most of us retreat and go, I can't do this. We focus on what we can't do and we pull back.
Yep, absolutely.
And really, we can do it if we just change simple words at a time and we redirect. So I really like the power of what as well. I focus on how, because how for me stands for honesty, open-minded, and willingness, which those are all characteristics that we need to have in our lives. We need to be honest with where we're going, open-minded, and willing. You know, one of the hardest things for me is to be open and say, I don't know everything. Because, you know, as human beings, we want to step into a situation and have all the answers. Right?
Well, Jenny just said that. And yes, I would like that.
I do.
But the other thing I've learned
actually, I don't. Yeah. It scared me to death.
Sounds good, right?
It scared me to death if I knew everything that was still to come.
But also, I mean, in all of these lessons, and I'm sure, Jenny, you can relate to this, like in the process of losing John and the process of finding out the cancer and the whole ordeal, I'm not in control. I am not in control. And so we don't have all the answers. We just don't have it.
Yeah.
And like you said, we probably wouldn't want them all.
We wouldn't. And the next word in this, the word effect is accept. So it goes hand in hand. So we acknowledge, we ask, and then we have to learn to accept, because we don't have control over most things. There's circumstances, and most of those we don't have control. So today, it's a Monday. We can all agree that that's a circumstance, but how our Monday goes and what we do with it is going to be different for each of us, depending on where we focus, right? And I can fall into the trap of falling into the negativity of, oh, this didn't go right, or this didn't quite have what I wanted to have happen. And if I do, I always lose. And so a simple phrase, I like helping people see to put on phrases. And when I started to find the power of words, I started a business called Becoming Threads. It was a t-shirt and positive apparel business for women to put positivity on themselves each day, because there's an effect with words. And what, as a mom of boys, I would go to baseball games and we would just watch these games, and I wanted something positive and I couldn't find it. And the idea came, we'll start making t-shirts. And if you want them, someone else would want them. And it's kind of back to what you're saying. It's like, well, there's t-shirts everywhere. So I started this business with my sister-in-law. We didn't know anything what we were doing, but we started and we began, right? But then we had to learn to accept that, you know, it was a learning process, right? And life, if you really think about it, is just full of experiences. And those experiences are where we learn and where we focus. And so accepting and finding acceptance in where we're at lets us relax a little bit, because when we're pushing up against life, it's too strong for us.
Yep.
And I'm sure you guys have found that with resiliency, wouldn't you say?
Yeah,
Oh, absolutely.
Because you can't change. There's circumstances that you have no control of changing.
Most of them.
Right? Yeah. And that's what, when we really think about it, we don't have very much control over much in our lives. None of us really knows what will be happening tomorrow, even later today. We don't say that being fearful, but we have to then find acceptance of where we're at. So that's that next word, is finding how to accept.
Acceptance. Okay, so we've got acknowledge, ask, accept.
Yes.
Okay.
And then we step into the power of abundance. So once we accept where we're at, we've acknowledged where we're at, we're asking better questions, we have to believe that there's enough room for everybody to have good. Because if we have scarcity mindset, then we'll stay in a scarcity mindset. So abundance is something we have to tune ourselves to. So think back when you were younger. One of my favorite songs was Lionel Richie's Dancing on the Ceiling. And I remember with one of my really good friends, we had a little clubhouse and we'd go out there and we'd get the radio. And it was back when you had that dial radio that you had to get it tuned just so. And if it's not tuned right, it's staticky and you can't enjoy the music, right? But if you tune it right, you can turn it up and we could dance our hearts out. Well, the truth is that's how abundant thinking is. You have to tune yourself to it each and every day. What I talk about with words is it's something we have to work on each day. So if you think this is a quick fix, like I'm going to think happy thoughts every day and my life's just going to go great, this isn't your message, because it's not really like that. Sometimes people ask me, are you always happy? Well, no, I'm a human being. I have struggle. I have things that don't go as planned. They still don't go as planned. We've had hard things recently in our lives. But yet you can redirect yourself and find that joy. And so a lot of times abundant thinking helps you get out of perfectionism and get back into just progress. Like, what step am I going to take today? What's that next step moving forward, right? Sometimes that's all we can do. Jenny and I have talked about that before when we're managing all these things. And it's like, what's just the very next step? Because when we look at the whole big picture of where we're headed, it can be overwhelming. So it's like, what are my goals? And that was one of the things with writing a book. I had to break it into small little chunks. And so I had to honor commitments to myself to write 25 minutes a day or 25 minutes, every other day. And I would have these little steps. And, over time, the book got done. But if I would have looked at the whole big picture, I would have just probably laid down in the fetal position and cried.
Right.
I can never do this. Right.
Right.
So that's the next word we want to put on, abundance. Then we step into action. That's the next word, our fifth A. They're all A words. It was kind of fun how they just all came to be that way. But action, and how I teach with action is we want to take action from a place of how we feel. You mentioned you're a life coach. I am as well. So often what drives our actions is the way we feel. So if we show up feeling confident, we take different actions than if we show up feeling fearful, right? Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have to remember how we're feeling. So we get to choose what we show up each day. We get to think about it. So when I was doing Becoming Threads, I got to a point where I had 50 t-shirts in my closet, all different sayings, right? And I could actually go into my room and consciously decide, what words do I need today? What words do I want to put on today? I need a keep it simple shirt because I've got too many things on my to-do list, or I need a grateful heart shirt because I'm having a hard time being grateful right now, or I need an easy does it shirt. And I could honestly pick the words that I needed to put on. And what I realized is most of us spend more time thinking about what we wear every day than taking 5 or 10 minutes to think about what we're going to put in our mind. But our brain is a big muscle, and it's something that we need to exercise. We think a lot about our physical body and exercise, eating well, but what are we telling ourselves? What words are we putting in our mind? So we need to put little reminders, have mantras, have little phrases, have I am statements, different things. And I help people create their own. I think it's really hard to give people their mantras.
Right. No,
because
you can't
words
do that.
they are so powerful to an individual. Each one of us, if I said a phrase, you'd each have a different story. And that's what we found when we were selling our shirts. Women would come up and say, I need these words because I am just recovering from breast cancer. Or I need these words because my best friend's son just committed suicide. Or I just need these words because I'm struggling. You know, they had different stories, and the power of someone's story was amazing. But it comes from how you feel. So you have to intentionally work that muscle, your mindset muscle. It makes a difference.
Yep. I love it.
I love it. All right, word number 6.
Okay, we're almost there. The next word is appreciate. And appreciate is one of those words, whatever you appreciate, appreciates. So it's a gratitude. We have to stay in gratitude and focus ourselves on gratitude. I just wrote an article and it was talking about let's ditch perfectionism. And one of the best ways to ditch perfectionism is to get back into gratitude. And I'm going to try today. Not like I'm going to be perfect the rest of my life, because that's where we get held up, but just being grateful. And so in any situation, if you can pull yourself back and just find one thing that you're grateful for, one thing, one lesson you're learning, one experience, one interaction, that can help your brain then start to focus on other good things.
Absolutely.
So the power of appreciate is just one of those words that we need to practice on a regular basis. And it is a practice because it really is easy to focus on the negative. And each one of us has what's called the reticular activating system in our brains. Our brain is just a big processor, and it focuses on what we focus on. So if we're focused on negative, you know what our brain says? Let me show you more negative. So we have to be in
plenty
charge.
in the world.
And
There
there's
is.
plenty
There's
to
plenty
find.
to find.
I mean, do you
So
remember when
true.
COVID was happening? I remember someone saying, great, listen to the news. But after you've listened to an hour of the news, you have to put some positivity in your life, that same amount, equal airtime for the good.
Yeah.
And that really stuck with
there's
me.
not really the ability to put equal airtime for the good. We don't have those channels. They don't exist, right? And I would say it's probably about 3 times. And really, like, the psychology behind a child hearing one negative thing is they have to hear 10 positives to wipe out that one negative. So if you think about 10 times, we don't have enough time in the day if you watch an hour of television, unless you're going to not sleep, right?
It's true.
You just don't have enough to reinforce that positively. So
you
we
have
need to
to
be careful
find-
about what we're putting into our minds.
Yeah, you have to really be intentional. I can't watch a lot of news.
Yeah.
I can't
I quit
focus
watching
on a
news.
lot of
I don't
negative
watch
stuff because it would drain me so much, right? I listen to positive podcasts. I read positive books. Music is a really powerful tool with words. Find a playlist that gives you words that inspire you. I have a Made for Joy playlist. And so they're words that bring me happiness and joy, and they make me feel better. And so when I'm feeling down, I just listen to those words, and I actually listen for the message that I need.
Yeah.
And I hear it and I see it. So when you become intentional to words, you start to see those words.
I will like to give you a tip, though.
Yeah.
As far as the news, I quit watching it, but of course you want to be aware of what's going on, right? But most, like Washington Post, New York Times has the 7 things you need to know today, and they give them to you in, I think, 3 minutes on their podcast.
So
and
without getting into just the...
NPR has a 5-minute, good morning, here's your what's happening in the world, and it's enough. You get all of the information, but
you
it's
can be
condensed.
aware without getting sucked into the negativity and the politicking.
And look, I don't want to hear all of the details. I don't need to know about how many, well, they usually will say like how many people died in Gaza today or whatever the big story of the day is. My heart breaks for those people, those family, and the crises that are going on in the world, but I cannot personally carry that, and I also have nothing to change it. And so all I can do is be aware and also let it go, because I can't change the outcomes right now for those people, right? Personally, I can't do anything about it.
And you have found something that works really well for you. You've found that I can't listen to all of it, but I do need a little bit. And this is working for me. And that's what the power of words are. You find what you need, and you can cultivate the words you need.
And it's important, right?
Presented
It's
in a
like
way that
important to
doesn't
be
pull you
aware,
down.
but it's important to understand how much time are you giving to the news or to the world, to everything outside that you have no absolute control over, and what is the personal impact that it makes on you in your life, in your family's life, in the people that you love the most, right? You can change that.
Well, I told you earlier that when I was feeling stuck 10 years ago, I had this inspired thought, change your words and you can change your story. Well, over the last 10 years, I've become an expert in the power of words, and it's changed my story. But you know what? Now I'm talking about, and what I always wanted this story to share. It's where I was struggling, right? I was struggling with words. And so now it's like, now share that with other people. Help somebody else that might be. Give them the hope that they can change as well.
I love this. I actually had a conversation with a friend of mine last summer about this very thing, about how we are energy, right? We are energy. We are energy beings. The world is energy. It all feels very solid and real, and it is, but we are, in the end of all things, energy. So then we start speaking about how when we speak, our words have energy. And once they're spoken, that energy is part of the creation of the world. And so how important is it that we put positive energy into this universe?
Yes.
And so I love that this is your book. I love it. This friend and I had hour-long conversation about this very concept about the energy of our words and the power that they have.
Yeah. If you think about it, it's a simple concept, but what you think about, you bring about. Anything that's been created started with a thought. That's how powerful our thoughts are. Yet we are so accustomed to words that we can just look past them or just not realize the power behind them. So again, the concepts and things that I'm sharing aren't necessarily something that no one's ever heard. It's just, hey, my life was stuck. This was an avenue to get me unstuck. And now I want to share it with you because you might be going through something similar. The last word of these 7 words is aspire. And the reason why aspire is because we're all taking steps forward. But you know, we've all heard that story that once you climb one mountain, there's another mountain to climb, right? We're never done. And that's why it's becoming with Becky. So I went from doing the t-shirt business, and then in 2019, right before COVID, we kind of put that business to the side because my real dream and desire was to speak and to coach. And I can't do everything, right? And I had to go, where's my focus? And the path was made clear, go here. Now, eventually I'd like to bring the shirts back. But what I found with these words is sharing how to put them in your lives. It doesn't matter any situation that you come up against, these words will help you move forward. So whether you acknowledge, whether you need to ask different questions right now, whether you need to drop into abundant thinking, maybe it's appreciate things today. You don't have to do all the words. And that's why I like to talk about doing one word at a time, practicing putting on those words. And it makes a difference. It makes a difference to become intentional and to just give a little bit of time to what you're thinking about, because that's how powerful our words are.
Oh, absolutely. I love that you came to share this today. And I love that these words, and especially the first 3, I'd say at least 4 of these words, the first 3 and then the action, is all keys and steps to building the tools of resilience in our own life. And so it's perfect. It's perfect for our show. It's a perfect message. I love it. Yeah, it's great. I love that you put this out there and that you're teaching it to other people.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've talked about a lot of words that all start with A, but I'm going to close with a word that starts with R, and it's resilience. Just help sum up what resilience is to you.
To me, resilience is taking the power back within us. All of us are going to say at many different times in our lives, this is not the plan. I've yet to find someone not have said that in their life, young or old. Yet we can find joy and happiness, and we can find good in our lives. And it has to do with where we choose to focus and the words we choose to put on each and every day. And to me, that's what resiliency is going through life and finding joy despite the hard. And it's one step at a time.
I love that.
I love it. I'm thinking, I always joke about T-shirts, right? So it's funny that you mentioned T-shirts because every time we interview someone,
we are going to build a merch site. I promise. I'm working on it.
There's always a one-liner or two that someone's like, "Oh my gosh, I want that on a T-shirt." But I didn't think of it. I'm putting on the words. I'm putting on the message. When I get dressed in the morning, even if there aren't any letters on my shirt, what am I putting on?
Yes.
We'll worry, like you said, I just loved it. We'll worry about what we're wearing more than what we're putting into our minds or into our mindset. So that is going to go home with me. What words do I put on today and how I interact with myself, my kids, my friends or coworkers and things. So, okay,
That's
Becky,
powerful.
where can our listeners learn more? I know you've told us the book and the website, but tell us again.
Yeah, you can go to becomingwithbecky.com and you can find the book on Amazon. It's called The Word Effect, 7 Simple Words to Create Your Most Beautiful Life.
Okay, and then before we got started today, you said you have a free ebook. So tell us about that because I think our listeners, like me, I've just been taking notes as you've been saying this. I want the ebook. I want to learn more. I want to be able to take it to that next step.
Yeah. So the ebook, you just go to becomingwithbecky.com/join. And the ebook is it's called The One Word Way. And it's 3 simple words that we can start changing today. And I'll give you an example. When we focus on what we can't do, we won't get anywhere. So just teaching your mind to focus on what can I do today. So back when I was trying to write the book, if I focused on, I can't do it like this person, or I can't do this, I never would have taken the steps. So what can I do today? When you give your brain that opportunity to focus on what you can do, it makes a difference. So I just offer 3 little words that most of us use every day. And if we just start shifting those, we can start moving our story forward because we all have access to words. I haven't made up a bunch of new words. I, like you guys, love looking at definitions. All of my words at the start of each chapter gives the definition of that word because we need to understand what we're saying. We need to know the words we're giving out into the world because what we speak, we bring into our lives. So I help people learn how to speak their own success. I go in and teach leaders and groups and teams how to take their words and use them intentionally to then step forward and find optimal innovation and creation in any situation. Because what we all have in common is uncertainty. Mm-hmm. That is something we all have in common, if you think about it, at different levels at different times. Yet we can be innovative and creative by using our words a little differently. Yeah. And it's not too hard when we become aware to it.
Okay, I love it.
Awesome.
I think it's
I
been
love it
great.
too.
Becky, thanks for joining us. This has been so fun. And watch out, world, if you're anywhere that maybe you could use a speaker, a leader, trainer, a coach, you can find her at becomingwithbecky.com.
Thank you so much.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, remember to subscribe to the podcast so that you will be notified of new episodes. We drop a new episode every Thursday. We would be so grateful if you give us a rating or a review. If you know someone who has a story, or maybe you have a story to share, send us an email at rrpodcast@ksl.com. You can also find us on Facebook at Relentlessly Resilient, on Instagram, Relentlessly Resilient Podcast. Both platforms have a Calendly link to set up a time to pitch your story for our show. Reach out. We would love to have you on our show.
As always, thanks to our amazing producer, Kellyanne Halverson, to our fabulous sponsor, Minky Couture. And remember, whatever you do today, remember to be kind. You have no idea the struggles other people are dealing with in their lives. Have a good day, everybody.